Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Iowa State Cyclones Live here on the Voice of College Football Network. I'm your host, Levi Stevenson. Also, for another 7 days, 7 and change, the managing editor over at Wide Right Natty Light. For, another 7 and change. Carter, I'm not appreciative here of the heckling for me screwing it up on the first time, but I am appreciative of everybody being here to talk about the Iowa State Cyclones. Even though today I'm rocking my Dubuque Fighting Saints sweatshirt. Obviously, main thing we're talking about today, coaching staff additions and transfer portal stuff. Now, granted, the coaching staff, there isn't really much for like new names this week, so much as Iowa State officially announcing the hiring of Tyler Roll and Jesse Bobbitt. But do have plenty of transfer portal news to talk about since the last time we talked. So we get into that, and actually just had a fairly significant piece of breaking news here in the last about 10 minutes or so. Last 15 minutes or so for next season. So let's just talk a little bit about the staff. So obviously, like I said, I would say announce kind of the official stuff here. As far as Tyler Roll being being offensive coordinator, Jesse Bobbitt being defensive coordinator. We know a few of the other hires, like the secondary coach and a few other spots too. So I haven't really we haven't really heard a lot of new names so far from last week. But now that Washington State played their bowl game yesterday, I know that was the first time that a lot of Iowa State fans had a chance to kind of not had a chance, but took the chance to watch a little bit of Washington State and see what that defense is going to look like. If you watch that game, especially the first half, I would say when teams were both playing foot on the gas, I think you can check out that game and see and really see and feel pretty good about where Iowa State's defense is headed. Especially, if a few of those players on that defense that are going to be in the transfer portal do indeed follow Iowa State, like Anthony Polano, the linebacker, that the defense is in good hands. Well, what we saw was that 4-2-5 scheme that they've been talking about, or a 4 down front that they've been moving to. We assume that it will be a 4-2-5, mostly because generally speaking, 4-3 defense, traditional 4-3 defenses they are few and far between. They don't really exist a lot in college football anymore. Iowa runs probably one of the only true 4-3 defenses left anymore. And even then they tend to rotate. They rotate some different personnel out. But a 4-2-5, for anybody that's not familiar with it, and one of these days, I'm gonna do a video over on the Wide Right or the soon to be rebranded Wide Right Natty Light YouTube channel. Probably like just kind of breaking down the 4-2-5 defense and how it works and what it might look like at Iowa State. Excuse me, under Jesse Bobbitt. And but essentially the difference is it's really close to a 4-3. A 4-3 is obviously four defensive linemen, 3 linebackers, and 4 defensive backs. So it's 2 edge rushers, 2 defensive tackles, and your linebackers is Sam, Mike, and Will, and then you have 2 corners and then a free safety and a strong safety. That is the most common traditional defensive lineup. That is I would say, of all defensive formations that have been played in the history of the game of football, that one has been played more than any of them else. More than any of the others. Now, with modern offenses, that defense is harder to run, especially in college, where a lot of teams are playing wide sets. There's a lot more speed. The offenses are too creative now, and they have too much motion, too many crossing routes, too much mesh involved for the 4-3 to be a really good base formation to run out of, just because you typically just don't have enough speed on the field. So what a 4-2-5 does is it basically swaps out one of those linebackers for an extra safety. So it is what we call a nickel personnel, which is 4 defensive linemen, 2 linebackers, 3 safeties, 2 corners. That's generally, if you hear the term nickel personnel, that is what it's referring to. That grouping of positions. Now, how they play in the 4-2-5 is it kind of depends on what your flavor of it is. Um, but what the linebacker that is swapped out for a safety, that position, it gets called if it, different things depending on what it is. Iowa State had a position similar to that in their 3-3 stack, since what they did essentially is they, with the 3-3 stack that Iowa State ran under Jon Heacock, what that does is it takes a lineman, moves it back to linebacker, because the line to replace the linebacker that was taken out for the safety. It's not a we swapped out a lineman for a safety. It's we swapped out a lineman for a linebacker and then a linebacker for a safety. So, which sounds like the same thing, but it's not. But in a 4-2-5, you're leaving four people on that defensive line, and that third linebacker is being swapped out for a safety, which Iowa State called the star position. You might hear it called a robber. You might hear it called a hornet. Virtually every team just kind of has a name for this. Sometimes it's just the mascot of the team. Like I'm sure Kansas State might have a wildcat position, or there's a number of, it doesn't really matter what it's called. Basically, it's just this extra safety that just kind of roams around the field. For Iowa State, we saw, Marcus Neal played a little bit of that. If you remember back in the earlier Campbell days, like Braxton Lewis played the star quite a bit. They're not a slot corner, because they're not, they will have to handle pass coverage and stuff like that, but they're also going to be, they're tasked with truly being like that player needs to be the smartest guy on the field. That guy needs to be able to move around. He needs to be able to drop in deep coverage. He needs to be able to come up and play the run. He needs to be your smartest defensive player on the field, which is hopefully one of your safeties. And that's who you're going to put there. It's not going to be a corner. You need more run support. Bo Freeler is a great. Yeah, that was the name. One of the names I was trying to come up with and just couldn't off my head. But Bo Freeler was absolutely earlier in his career. He played more star. Later, as injuries became more of a problem, he dropped back to more of a traditional kind of strong safety type role, and other guys came up and played in that star spot, because his junior and senior year, as Bo got older and his injuries started kind of piling up, it was typically like him at a strong safety, Malik Verdon at free safety, and then they rotate a few other guys in that star position. But definitely earlier in his career, Bo Freeler absolutely did play some of that star position. So that's really the difference here. Is you take that 4-3, you have two linebackers in the middle there that their entire job, they're going to drop back into coverage most of the time. They're still going to be, they're still going to need to keep their eyes kind of in the backfield for RPOs and things like that. But for the most part, whereas the 3-3 stack, way that defended run was essentially to plug up the offensive line and force runs to the outside of the tackles, where the safeties could come down and tackle. And that's why you always saw Iowa State's leading tackler be like Bo Freeler or Jamison Patton or Braxton Lewis or whoever was back there. That's why those guys always led the team in tackles, or Kamari Cotton-Moya, even at the very earliest part of the Campbell era, is because that 3-3 stack is designed for those safeties to come down and make those plays in the run game. The 4-2-5 really relies on the defensive line, to be your primary run stopping thing, with everything else coming in to help and fill gaps. Instead of the two linebackers coming up just to plug a gap so that way stuff spills outside, you're using your nose tackle and your defensive tackle, and you're using that to plug up the middle. The edge rushers coming out and containing the edges, and then you use then the linebackers are moving around to try to fill gaps where they show up, type of thing. But they're really just sitting back. They're kind of lurking back behind the defensive line. Well, really what this means at Iowa State is that now you're going to try to have more speed on the field. In the 3-3 stack, you want your linebackers they need to be mobile, but they also need to be a little bit beefier, so that way they can tango with some with like a tackle or a guard or a tight end or something like that. They need to be able to physically match up with those, so that way when they're up, um, fitting in the run game, fitting in their gaps in the running game, that they can handle that physically, so that way they're not the weak link in that chain. In a 4-2-5, your defensive line is anchoring that, and especially your nose tackle needs to be the anchor of that. So, in a 4-2-5, you always want a really, really high end nose tackle that can eat up a double team and cause more problems on the interior. So that way your edge rushers can come in and shoot gaps and things like that. Um, with the defensive line being the anchor of your running game, you want your linebackers to have more speed so that they can chase stuff to the outside, so that they can quickly fill gaps as needed. They can shoot gaps in the pass rush, they can shoot them in the run game, how it goes. So the overall goal of the 4-2-5 is to be aggressive and it's to be fast. So a lot of these, it wouldn't shock me to see some of these linebackers that are in the room that are a little bit bigger. They're not as fast, but they're a little bit bigger, so that they can play in that 3-3 stack. It wouldn't shock me a ton to see some of them leave, because they're not a great athletic fit for the new defense, which requires a 3-3 stack is gonna look at like a 220-pound linebacker and say, maybe they're more of a, maybe they're your Tampa 2 linebacker that drops back in between the safeties. You know, you might drop them coverage a little bit more, but you're not really gung ho about playing a 215 or 220-pound linebacker. You do not like that in 3-3-5, because you need them to be able to physically contend up at the line of scrimmage. In a 4-2-5, you're okay. I mean, 220 is still light, but like, a 230, 235-pound linebacker, that weight might be a little bit small for a 3-3-5, where you want to be in the 240, 250 range, or maybe even, somewhere up there. Being 225 pounds in a 4-2-5 is not a big deal, because you need to be quick to be able to get laterally, to be able to move laterally, to in pass coverage, to undercut crossing routes, and to chase down ball carriers outside of the tackles. So you're going to see, some of the faster linebackers in the program will absolutely have a home in the system. But if you see some guy, like, I'm not necessarily calling out, because like I'm going to name a few names, but not because I think they're going to transfer or whatever. This is just truly just a guy like Cooper Eagle, who is talented enough he could transfer to Penn State and find some playing time. He's very good vertically. He's not quite as mobile laterally, as far as like getting to pass coverage out in the flats and stuff like that. He's not quite as good at that. He's good at dropping back, and he's coming forward, but not as good laterally. So maybe Cooper Eagle, maybe look at Cooper Eagle and say, he's a good enough linebacker to justify keeping and putting him in the system, because he can learn it, and he can be effective for however much longer he stays here, to the end of his career or whatever. Like, he's good enough to be fine, to be serviceable there. But Cooper Eagle may not be your ideal build for a linebacker in a 4-2-5, because his quickness is more vertical than it is lateral. And in a 4-2-5, you need your linebackers to be very flexible laterally and vertically. So, if you see like some defensive players moving out, part of it may be because they're going to Penn State because they're good. That just happens. But it also, I would say it's new defense, this 4-2-5, assuming they're going to go to a 4-2-5, because running a 4-3 that seems crazy to me, or at least as a base 4-3. Not nickel personnel, I should say. I mean, a 4-2-5, you can take that you could take that star, hornet, wasp, robber position, whatever you want to call it. You can bring them up and sort of mimic a 4-3 alignment. You're just going to have nickel personnel. Or it says we played 4-2-5 under Wall. I think not inclined running around. Yeah, and that's absolutely true. You had those two guys running around. Now, even back then though, we still played. We did still play some traditional 4-3 stuff. It wasn't like it was 4-2-5 was absolutely like a nickel package that I had available to him. But it was, yeah, they rotate around. You are right that they did run some 4-2-5 stuff with that group, specifically because you had Knott and Klein, who are both very good laterally, to be able to live inside of that defensive system. So some of these defensive departures you're going to see are truly just like a scheme fit where it's like this guy's athletic or this guy's skill profile just doesn't match what we need out of that player in a 4-2-5. So, but what I'm going to tell you, what that's a defensive kind of really like elevator pitch for kind of how the 4-2-5 works. And like I said, at some point I'm going to go through and put together a video and just kind of and actually show you some film so you guys can see kind of how guys move around in that. Um, but what I am telling you though is that both offensively and defensively, there are some guys that are absolutely leaving because they are going to fit better or because they have a bigger opportunity at Penn State to make more money, whatever, or or Florida or something like that to make more money. Absolutely. And so yeah, Redbirds. This is a great point. Is if you watch Wazoo's linebackers again, they're especially like Polano, they're a little bit smaller, but they are fast. They are really fast to the ball. They swarm very quickly, and that is exactly how the 4-2-5 is supposed to operate. That's how it. Gary Patterson at TCU was kind of the pioneer of this scheme of taking a nickel package and turning it into a versatile defensive formation that can be a 4-3. It can be a 4-2-5. It can be a 3-3 stack. It can do lots of different things. It can be a 3-4. Those TCU teams always had undersized but fast linebackers. And that's where Iowa State is probably going to be too, where if you look at those Wazoo linebackers, they're quick, they attack. And when you can have that, what that also means is you have extra speed on the field to go after the quarterback. It's going to obviously a lot of flexibility here. Now, the key here will be, can they successfully recruit defensive linemen that fit the nose tackle requirements? Because the nose tackle on the defensive line, the nose tackle is where that whole thing centers around. Is if you don't maintain integrity at that nose tackle spot as far as defending the run, then that whole thing starts to break down, and then the linebackers and safeties got to come up and fill in gaps where they weren't going to have to before, and things start breaking down. So that's the question: is how effectively are they able to get guys in the program that can be that anchor, that nose tackle that they really need, which isn't necessarily any different of a problem from the 3-3 stack. If you remember Ray Lima at the beginning of the 3-3. The 3 down front, Ray Lima was really good. Now his senior year, he was very But then, eventually Dominic Orange was a very good nose tackle. In the middle there, you had, rest in piss, Isaiah Lee. He's not dead, but good riddance, Isaiah Lee. But then you had a few other guys, J.R. Singleton, that came in and did a nice job at that nose tackle spot. And they'll just need to keep that pipeline going. And in a 4-2-5, it's not two defensive tackles. It is a nose tackle and a defensive tackle. They are coming out of the same room. They're coming out of the same group of personnel, but they are notated differently because the nose tackle is there to plug stuff up. The defensive tackle is going to have some freedom to shoot gaps and to try to be aggressive and get to that runner in the backfield. So how they can recruit that position will determine, at least partially, how successful this scheme is, but they were very, very good at Washington State. They've got bodies. If they can keep this recruiting class together, keep Daniel Howard in the recruiting class and bring in a couple guys, I absolutely think that this 4-2-5 could be very, very good for Iowa State. It'll help firm things a little bit in the running game. When Iowa State's defense was healthy, the running game was never really an issue. It was always fairly good at stopping the run. So that was never like a big problem. But what it does do, though, is it gives you more flexibility. So that way, if you have a four down front, you don't need to dedicate 2 linebackers to helping with the run. You can just leave your line go and let your linebackers sit back and lurk. So given kind of what Iowa State wants to do and how it's going to respond to the Big 12's current offensive schemes, this is going to make it. I do think this is the better way to go going forward schematically. But we will elaborate on that in more detail on a further day. Carter Hansen. Yeah, so we have seen some Wazoo guys already enter the portal. Like I said, we know there's a corner. I can't remember the corner's name, but then Anthony Polano, the linebacker, we've seen a couple of those guys already decide that they're entering the portal. And we kind of just assume that Iowa State at least has a good shot at getting them, just because, especially Polano followed the staff from South Dakota State to Washington State. And then, like, the day after Jimmy Rogers was announced as head coach, Anthony Polano's in the transfer portal. So it's a reasonable suspicion that he would come with over. Let's talk a little bit out here about some of these transfers that have gotten announced in the last week, though. So, obviously, one of the big ones, I should say, last Saturday was the announcement that Rocco Becht was transferring. And I don't know if this came as a super shock. I think I had it in my head that there was a decent shot that Rocco could stay. And from everything like I've heard, is that if the circumstances were right, I think Rocco would have stayed. Like, I think he kind of wanted to, but certain conditions needed to be met, and I think it became a matter of, for Jimmy Rogers, it was like, how much of your future are you willing to mortgage for 1 year of Rocco? Rocco was going to demand probably $1.5 million, maybe 2 million in NIL. Maybe he gives kind of the home team discount, but on the market, he's going to get 1.5, 2 million at least. He's not like a top flight transfer quarterback, but he's up there for sure. Like, if he decides to go to Florida or Penn State or whatever, he'll get at least probably 2.5 million, I would guess. Like, if he goes to Penn State, if he goes to either of them, he'll probably get 3 million. And maybe he'd get a little bit more at Penn State just because he knows the guy in charge. But Iowa State could, like, theoretically, they could afford to pay that. But you would then lose a bunch of money that you need to go out and get new guys. Now, by not paying Rocco this year, you can save that money to go acquire guys for the rest of the staff, or for the rest of the roster. And if you feel like you can hang on to, which we did get confirmation that Connor Moberly will be back, lifelong Cyclone fan, he's going to be back. Awesome, love it that Moberly's here for it. And I think if you develop him as the starting quarterback, I think he can be plenty good enough to keep Iowa State competitive and all that. The big name behind him is Alex Mansky, who there's a lot of kind of smoke around the idea that Kansas State is going hard after him, and potentially Penn State. Penn State would be a weird one to me. I mean, like, it's not weird in that, he played for Matt Campbell. He was recruited by Campbell, and so naturally Campbell wants his guys in there. I get it. But he's going to be able to get pretty much any quarterback in the portal that he wants most seasons. So I think, he could, like, this offseason, like let's say Rocco goes to Florida, could Campbell go get Bo Perbula, who Bo Perbula is in the portal again. He was already at Penn State. He's got his stuff on his social media changed over to Penn State. If he goes to Penn State, you're going to get a year of Bo Perbula. And then after that, along the way, you're going to get your own freshman quarterback coming in. You can get a portal guy. Mansky to Penn State feels like a weird thing, because it seems like he's, if you get Bo Perbula is going to start over Mansky, no question about it. And then you'd have Mansky for his then redshirt sophomore season, but at that point, you may have access to a better transfer portal quarterback. So Mansky seems like a weird fit at Penn State, but Kansas State recruited him hard in high school. He grew up a Cyclone fan, so he eventually came here. But Kansas State recruited him hard out of high school, and the only reason Kansas State would be going after a quarterback right now is if they believe Avery Johnson is on his way out. He did post something to his Instagram the other day that was kind of cryptic, that maybe sounds like he might be on the way out. I don't know. But what that does mean is, like, if they're going out, is that they think Avery Johnson is gone, which is unfortunate for Iowa State, because that dude absolutely lives for losing to Iowa State. But if Avery Johnson's gone and Alex Mansky is, like, they decided this is going to be their guy, Conkline recruited him in high school. If they decide that this is our guy, they can offer him, how much money is Iowa State going to be willing to offer him versus Kansas State? Does that matter to Alex Mansky? You know, I think that Iowa State has as good a shot as anybody to hang on to Alex Mansky, but we'll see. You know, would he? I mean, it would be incredibly toxic for him to just demand, being the starter over Connor Moberly, but I don't think he would do that. But he would want to at least like have some assurances that he absolutely is going to be in the running for starting next football season, which I have no reason to believe he wouldn't be. If you have a competition between Mansky and Moberly in the offseason to get the starter spot, I think every Cyclone fan would be totally fine with that going into next season. You're still going to have to go get at least a backup in the portal, but a backup or two in the portal. But if you can't hang on to Mansky, then maybe you go in the portal to try to find a guy that's at least starter quality to see if he can compete with Moberly, just to see what's going on there. But as far as Rocco goes, he was probably going to be more money than it was worth for Iowa State, because I think this is kind of how I'm approaching this too, is that I'm kind of to the point where like none of these transfers are really bothering me anymore. Like I don't care that really. I mean, like I care, but it doesn't bother me really anymore that Rocco transferred, or that Jeremiah Cooper transferred, or that Jontez Williams transferred, or now that as was announced 10 minutes ago, that Carson Hansen is in the portal. None of these are really bothering me, because all of those guys, every one of them has one season left. And pretty much regardless of what was going to happen, Iowa State is not probably going to be in, like, they're not going to be in Big 12 contention next year, most likely. Maybe they put together an awesome portal class and this coaching staff turns out to be like the truth, and maybe they're there. And if they do, awesome. If they can do that with what they've got, great. But if you're working on the assumption that 2026 is probably just going to be kind of a rebuilding year, and you're really more looking at development and growth versus wins and losses, you're building for like 27 and 28, then there's no reason to dump a bunch of money into Rocco Becht, into Jeremiah Cooper, into Jontez Williams, into Carson Hansen, that all these guys have 1 year left. Now, does that mean that Abu Sama is out the door? I don't think so, especially because Abu's never gotten the full-time. He's never gotten full-time running back carries in extended games, basically. He's always had to split with Carson Hansen, which I think is I think personally has stunted Abu Sama's growth. I think we saw it in the Colorado game last year. Colorado was bad, but I think we clearly see that Abu Sama tends to get stronger throughout the game. We saw it again in the Houston game 2 seasons ago. We saw it in the BYU game. And then we saw, this season against Colorado that, as Abu gets more and more carries, he gets more comfortable and he gets better throughout the game. So I think if Abu Sama sticks around and he plays inside Tyler Roll's system, which is going to give him, which should give him a good scheme to run through. I think Abu Sama is, if he sticks around and decides he wants to be the guy, he's absolutely got a shot to play himself into being an NFL draft pick next year. So I think that the upside for Abu Sama sticking around is massive. And I think if I were an Iowa State fan, I think I would be very excited, because the whole bit with Carson Hansen was that he was more of if you need 4, he's going to get you 4. If you need 5, he's going to get you 4, but he's always going to get you 4 or 5 yards. He's never going to have big negative plays or anything like that. But still, as the numbers bear out, I believe from last time I checked, Abu Sama is currently the active leader in career yards per career yards per carry at Iowa State. And there's a reason for that. He might take a negative play here and there, but he also is capable of busting off a 20, 30, 50, 80-yard run just about any time he touches the ball. Whereas Carson Hansen, doesn't have the long speed to break off a 75-yard run most of the time. If he's got nobody around him, sure, but he's a vertical runner that likes to get vertical and just punch up through the defense, which is very valuable. I don't want to discount that. That's a very valuable thing to have in a running back, is a guy that doesn't ever lose yards, and the guy that you can rely on him. Like if he's got a little bit of a lane, He's going to get you 10, 15 yards, bang, 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 bang. That's extremely valuable for an offense that wants to be able to kind of just methodically move the ball down the field and all that. That's great. Abu Sama presents to you a completely different threat in the running game, in a guy that can literally take it to the house anytime he touches the ball. And sometimes that means he takes a negative play, which isn't great. You would like to avoid that, but I mean, the ceiling with Abu Sama is if the light ever comes on and he's able to, get rid of those lows and, achieve the always get you 3 or 4 yards, achieve that and then keep his explosiveness. I mean, you're talking about a very, very productive running back that you've got waiting in your room right there. And I hope he decides that, like, you know what, being the lead guy, finally getting to be the guy that gets 25, 30 carries in a game and can be the bell cow and can get better throughout the game and have a chance to really shine. I hope he takes advantage of that, because if he does, he will be in the NFL. He'll be a Kansas City Chief before you know it. Carhan says, did we take that Toledo defensive guy for our coach, the first team all conference safety end of the portal? Yeah. So there was a first team all MAC safety from Toledo that did end of the portal. I don't remember his name off the top of my head. But then we also did hire Ross Watson. He's their co-defensive coordinator and safeties coach. We hired him to be our safeties coach. I talked about a little bit about this last week. I could not be more excited for that hire. I think this defensive scheme and having him, that's an all-star. That's an A+ hire. And this is absolutely no shot at Deion Broomfield at all. I think Ross Watson may actually be an upgrade at the safety spot for Iowa State. If you look at PFF, Toledo's safety group graded out as like the 5th best safety room in the country. He's a very, very good safeties coach that, whenever Jesse Bobbitt decides to, whenever he gets a head coaching job available to him and he can go take that, I would bet Ross Watson is the first in line to be that defensive coordinator. I think he's an A+ guy to have in the program. And hopefully you can keep him around a long time, because he's awesome. And well, he's a great fit there. And I hope that, Ross Watson is enough to keep Marcus Neal around, because Marcus Neal would be perfect at that star, that star robber Hornet position in that 4-2-5, that roaming third safety. Marcus Neal would be outstanding in that role. He would be he'd be first team all conference he'd be an All-American candidate at that spot in that defense. And with the personnel that they have a chance to bring in with that scheme, Iowa State has a chance to have a very salty defense next year. Even if the offense, maybe it takes time to get things up and running, but that defense is going to be really, really good. It has a chance to be very, very good if they get these transfers that we're looking at, the Toledo safety, the corner from Washington State, Anthony Polano. If they can bring those guys in and get this group together, Marcus Neal could be part of one of these saltiest defenses, maybe the best defense in the Big 12 outside of, that's not in Lubbock, Texas, that doesn't cost $20 million. I mentioned it before. The other guys, Jeremiah Cooper and Jontez Williams both announced their intention into the portal, as well as just about 15 minutes ago, Carson Hansen. Like I said, I'm not as worried about these guys. They're essentially at this point, they're 1-year rentals. You can take their NIL money and pay guys that come in that fit you better, that you're going to have for more than 1 year. You can rebuild a roster. If you take those 4 guys' NIL money, you can rebuild a good chunk of this roster with some really nice players. And maybe your quarterback loses a lot of experience and maybe you're running out Connor Mobley or Alex Mansky, but you can develop those guys and you can take those savings and apply them around the rest of the team, get some more pass catchers, get another running back along with Abu Sama, assuming, hopefully Abu Sama stays, and get River Peppers healthy. And if she can keep him in the program, keep him healthy, I think he'd be awesome. I believe River Peppers was recruited by Tyler Roll, so that would be absolutely a reason to stick around. Yeah. Track says, do you think we can survive having linebackers that are so small at 6'1", 200 pounds? It's too small for the Big 12. You may not have been in here when I was talking about it before and kind of how the 4-2-5 works, but 200 pounds is small. If you bring those guys into Ames, you can have them at 220 by the time spring ball starts. I'm not really worried about them being 200 pounds right now. For Washington State, for those guys at Washington State were probably late additions. They may not have had a chance to put weight on. Um, I am not. I'm not worried about those guys. They'll, if they're going to bring those guys over, I would be shocked if they didn't put 20-25 pounds on them to get them a little bit more beef. Now in a 4-2-5, you want your linebackers to be a little bit smaller so that way they can be more mobile, they can be quicker sideline to sideline. So if you see a bunch of 225, 230 pound linebackers running around at Iowa State, next season, that is by design. That is to keep guys fast. And you're not gonna, the two by the end of his career, you have 250-pound Mike Rose. That guy is not, like, by the end of his career, that guy's not a great fit for a 4-2-5 because he's not quick enough laterally. He's too big. But 230-pound, 225-pound linebackers are absolutely viable in a 4-2-5. So, even bigger safeties. Like I said, Marcus Neal was made in a lab to play in that third safety spot in that hybrid, the hybrid safety linebacker spot that the 4-2-5 has built in there. You could almost not design a better player for that than Marcus Neal. So hopefully that's enough to keep him around. Hopefully the new coach is enough to keep him around too. I don't know that it will be, because I would be shocked if he is not fielding some very wealthy offers from SEC schools, from Big Ten schools. Like, I can't say it would shock me a ton to see him. Like, if he wasn't at Iowa State and he gets a big SEC offer, I can't say it would shock me a lot to see him at, like, Georgia. Like he's good enough to play at any SEC school, any Big Ten school. Yeah, he's just plug and play, and he's probably the best safety on any team that he goes to. So, hopefully that's enough to keep him. If not, I think, as CW and Bloom, I believe, talked about this, this weekend, and I want to echo their advice, is that you're going to see all these guys coming in the portal. Like, there's going to be more. Like, can't say I would be completely shocked to see Ben Bramer enter the portal. I don't know about Gabe Burkle since he, like, exploded his knee. But, like, if Ben Bramer leaves, yeah, you're like, yeah, you're going to be disappointed. Ben Bramer's really good. There are other tight ends. There are tight ends that may fit the scheme better. You're going to lose some players that some of your favorite players are going to leave. Some of them have already left. It's just what's happened. That's how college football works now. We were largely insulated from it for a long time, and now we're experiencing it. And I do get a little bit of a kick out of the Iowa fans that are attempting to, like, run victory laps around Iowa State. Iowa State's program going through so much change, as if this exact same thing isn't going to happen when Kirk Ferentz retires. Even if they, like, hire internally or they bring back LeVar Woods when Kirk Ferentz retires, a bunch of dudes are going to transfer. They're going to lose a lot of players. It's going to happen. And, they are right now, they're currently, they are currently insulated from it just the same way we are. But that is, at this point, it's death taxes and a massive wave of transfers after your coach leaves. That's just how college football works now. So you're just going to have to kind of get used to it and understand that Iowa State will have a full football roster next fall. They have an opportunity to bring in a lot of talented guys. They can bring over guys from Toledo and Washington State and whoever else, from other really good defenses, and they can teach them to play in the Big 12. Things will be okay. And like I said, if you take the approach to it that 2026 is a building year to prepare for hopefully a good competitive run at the top of the Big 12 in 27, especially if you can bring back, especially if either Mobley or Mansky or both come back and they develop this year and develop into a really solid starting quarterback. 27 is absolutely a viable target for Iowa State to get back to feeling like they can, be in the race for a Big 12 title berth. So if you go into an understanding that 26 is a rebuilding year, pretty much no matter what, and then any success on that is just a cherry on top, take that approach to it. And I promise you that these next couple weeks, when you see more and more guys enter, I promise you it will get easier. The portal opens a week from Friday. So it wouldn't shock me if January 5th, that month, that weekend, or even that, the 3rd, 4th, and the 5th, that weekend, you're going to see a bunch of dudes enter the portal, both from us and from other schools. And you might see a bunch of them from other schools start committing to Iowa State over, right, bang, 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 right in a row. So just hang on. And I promise things will be okay. If you're embarrassed, let's go to the Hawks on my crime. Yeah. If any of them go to Iowa, immediately fuck them. I can respect going to Penn State. I can respect if Rocco decides to go to Florida. I respect that. It's close to home, big program. I get it, all that. If any of them transfer to Iowa, immediately go all the way to hell. I immediately hope you get the Adam Haluska treatment anytime we play you. I hope things are miserable for you. I hope you get booed walking down the street because you suck. Yeah, if anybody transfers to Iowa, you suck. I've been very much like, I'm not going to get on the players because I don't blame them. They came here to play for a different coach. I do not blame them for leaving, especially if they want to follow Matt Campbell to Penn State. I can't really blame them a lot. It sucks, and you wish that guys stuck around more, but it is what it is. If you go to Iowa, fuck you. That's just where I'm at with it. So you're immediately going to lose my, let's not get on the players for making a transfer thing. You immediately lose that protection from me as soon as you transfer to Iowa. That can go all the way to hell. So if any Iowa State players are watching this and you feel like you want to transfer, go literally anywhere else. Go to UNI, go to Minnesota, go to Kansas State. I don't care. Pick one. Do not go to Iowa. Or I will relentlessly boo you the next time we play Iowa. So, and plus transferring to a rival, to an in-state rival, that's some loser shit. That's so lame. But anyways, that's just kind of where things are at. Yeah, Alls. Yeah, Alls is the name of that. The safety from Toledo. He's a first team all conference guy. One of the leaders of that group that allowed Toledo safeties to be one of the highest graded groups in the country. I would be shocked if Iowa State isn't going hard after him. And obviously we should have an in on that guy, given that we're grabbing his position coach to be our safeties coach. I mean, by now we're multiple weeks on at this point from Campbell leaving. I can't tell you how to feel. I can't tell you when it's okay to stop, feeling shit about it. But what I can tell you right now, I don't know how next season's going to go. I don't know how well the program's going to go doing forward, or how well it's going to do going forward. What I do know is that Jimmy Rogers seems like a good coach, and this staff, the staff he has assembled at Iowa State is pretty much picture perfect. There are very few, if any, people that I think that he could have added that he missed on. Was Tyler Mauser, was Taylor Mauser coming back ever an option? Probably not. But getting Tyler role, A+. Love that. The offensive line coach from Auburn, Auburn's line wasn't great, but he's had multiple jobs in the SEC. I think he's a good coach. Ross Watson, awesome hire for that safety spot. Jesse Bobbitt seems like a great defensive coordinator. I think Jimmy Rogers has given himself and given the program as good a shot as you could possibly ask for of being of maintaining what Campbell put there. And there's a reason that on the way out, Campbell even made sure to mention in that Des Moines Register article that he thinks that Jimmy Rogers is a great coach that will be able to maintain what they had. I mean, there's a reason he said that. I remain hopeful. This is kind of we're trusting the process right now. That's what we're doing. What a full circle moment. We are trusting the process right now. So I know if Ben Bramer enters the portal, if Gabe Burkle enters the portal, if Abu Sama enters the portal, if Marcus Neal enters the portal, it's going to sting. I promise you. It's going to be like, man, I wish he could have stuck around. But I promise you that player will be replaced with somebody that fits their system, that is going to be productive for them next year. So Freddie says if we have a serious season, I'm playing Matias for not getting in the car again. Yeah. So that's a good. I'm fine with that. Um, I will say though, like I said, my mindset right now, if I was saying it can be in a bowl game next year and feel like we're on the upswing and that you've got like real momentum going into 27, to me, that is an absolute win. I don't need like even though Iowa State's schedule like theoretically should be a little bit softer next year. You're missing Tech again somehow. Somehow they've missed Tech 2 years in a row. But we'll have to see how the rosters shake out with the portal and all that. But right now, you should have an achievable path to a bowl game. I don't think they're going to be contending for a Big 12 title. If they do, great. But then we're way ahead. But Trek says defensive line coach. I'm trying to remember now. Did they? I thought the problem with this like offseason is like, especially with transfers and coaches, is you hear so many names get floated out there as like, oh, it might be this guy, it might be this guy, it might be this guy, and you can never tell. Like, it's hard to keep track of like what is known information and what is like a rumor. It's hard to keep it's hard to keep track of all that. But I know there was a name floated out there. I don't remember if it was like rumor or not, but like Washington State's defensive line coach, I think, is potentially a candidate there. I don't know if if that's been confirmed or anything like that. I would have to imagine that their defensive line coach would be probably following over with that, but I don't know if that's been confirmed yet or any of that. Yeah. If Ben Bramer retires, if Ben Bramer transfers, Rocky Beers from Colorado State, good player. Rocky Beers is a good tight end, and if Iowa State is going after him, they will not be the only team going after Rocky Beers. He's a very good tight end. But boy, howdy, would that be a fun player to have a name. He'd be the first beer let in the stadium. He'd be the first beers let in the stadium at Iowa State, in history. Watch, you're gonna see like Jamie Pollard like chain himself naked to the gates at Jack Trice Stadium protesting Rocky Bears getting in. But yeah. So I think he's absolutely a target for the tight end position. If this is assuming that Bramer and Burkle are both gone, we'll see about like Cooper Alexander. If Cooper Alexander sticks around, all that, my guess is it's not a coincidence that these guys are starting to show up, as far as declaring for the portal and all that. Yeah. Wazoo did a few fun looking stunts. Four-man, helmet far in front. That's the other thing too. I guess I didn't really elaborate too much. And I will when I do that kind of 4-2-5 scheme video that I've been not so subtly hinting at. When I get around to doing that, is that the 4-2-5, but they're being four down offensive linemen, that gives you a lot more flexibility to stunt, twist, do creative things with the defensive line to create a little bit of havoc up front. If you remember like watching like Arizona last year, they don't have like their personnel wasn't anything special, but their whole defense was like, let's just be the most aggressive shit you've ever seen and cause a tons of problems for everybody. Now Iowa State was able to counter that. They were able to figure that out and really punish Arizona for it. But if you are a little bit smarter with it than Arizona was, because Arizona was basically pedal to the metal, be as aggressive as possible all the time, and just see what happens basically. But if you can run a 4-2-5 and be solid in the back, with your back seven, and then be creative up front in pass rush situations, that gives you a lot of freedom to do that kind of stuff, which helps guys get free to get to the quarterback too. Fritz says, how bad was the Burkle injury? Would he be back by the start of the season? I guess there's been no official word. From what I understand is that his knee injury was like significant. Like if you remember like the knee injury that Brandon Ayuk suffered where it just like blew up his ACL, MCL, LCL, all that stuff or whatever. From what I understand is that like Burkle's deal is like his knee is blown. Like maybe he's ready by like September. We'll see. I mean, we'll see what his recovery looks like, and maybe it's not. Maybe it's not that severe. From what I understand, is it is a pretty severe knee injury that could, prevent him from being ready to start the season. Could theoretically prevent him from playing next season at all, um, which would mean he would get a medical red shirt. So, like Burkle could theoretically transfer someplace with the understanding that he's going to continue his rehab, take a medical red shirt next year, and then play his last season in 27, for Iowa State or for somebody else. So that would theoretically, that would be kind of like the old sit out transfer that we used to have, where you bring in a guy, he sits out for a year, and then you time it up, and the next season after that he slots in, and that's just what it is. We'll see, but from what I understand is that Burkle's knee injury is very, very significant and would probably not be ready to go for the beginning of next season. But who knows? I mean, I'm sure he's already had surgery on it, so I'm like, it's kind of a no. We'll wait and see what happens here. And he could choose to stick around just to do his rehab too, just so he's not like changing that whole process midway. For a guy like Rocco, where it's a shoulder thing, probably not a big deal. If he changes rehab facilities or whatever it is, or rehab programs. With Burkle's injury, with how significant it was, maybe you want to stay, especially because I think he's probably got an NFL future ahead of him. If he can stay healthy, he's got an NFL future ahead of him. So we'll see how that goes. As far as like, I don't, on the offensive line, I'm not sure. Like, we saw Dylan Barrett declare for the draft and all that. We haven't heard about anything as far as like, I haven't heard any noise at all about any offensive line transfers. I think the one guy I saw floated out there is Vaea Ikakula, which would make me more sad than any of the other guys, because I loved watching Vaea Ikakula. If he transfers, that would make me very sad, but it is what it is. But I haven't even heard any of the other guys floated as far as guys that might transfer. So who knows? The last one, I think we knew he was going to the portal, but I think he may have just officially declared today, was Xavier Townsend. Probably not a big surprise considering just how spotty his playing time was last year. I'm disappointed by that, because I was really, really high on him. I thought the skill set and athleticism was like tailor-made to be a really big time receiver for Iowa State, and just never put together. I think he was banged up quite a bit. It's a bummer to see that guy. Just like I was, bummed to see Zay Robinson in the portal, which I don't know if Zay Robinson is theoretically still considering coming back or not. And I guess the other one is Brett Eskelson, who announced today that he's going to be in the portal. I did see, I mean, if you're looking at Iowa State's receiving core from last year, who are you looking at that? I mean, is there anybody in that group that you're really looking at and saying like, oh my gosh, like if we don't get this guy, we're screwed? I mean, they were like, the wide receivers were like by far the worst position group on the team last year, and it wasn't even close. Which is why my hot take is that I'm not that disappointed. I'm not that disappointed about Pauly leaving. I know a lot of people really like Noah Pauly and things like, oh, he helped Jalen Nolan, Jade Higgins. I kind of think he was a Christian Watson, Jade Higgins, Jalen Nolan merchant, which sounds kind of funny that he's a merchant of 3 NFL receivers, but those 3 receivers, like Jalen Nolan, Jaden Higgins, were largely like fairly finished products by the time Noah Pauly was in town. And Christian Watson, coming out of North Dakota State, was an athlete, but not a particularly polished wide receiver. And when you look at the wide receiver group last season with how much they struggled to catch the fucking ball, I don't know, if you're a wide receivers coach and your entire job is to teach them how to get open and how to catch the ball consistently, and your room is not consistently getting open and is not consistently catching the ball, personally, I think maybe you're just not doing your job. So, call that a hot take if you want. Maybe Noah Pauly will be great at Penn State. I don't know. But from what I can tell is that he was not doing his job at Iowa State. So I'm not really still worried about that. Maybe your new receivers coach gets those guys turned around. If Chase Soul decides to stay, I really do think Chase Soul, was starting to turn it on towards the end of the year. I think if he sticks around, I think he can be a really, really nice receiver for Iowa State. But I don't look at Brett Eskilson and see him as indispensable. Like I don't see him as a guy that like absolutely you have to keep him because he's just so unbelievably, he's just so unbelievably productive. I mean, he was obviously its leading receiver, but he's not irreplaceably good. Which I know this sounds very harsh, but like I'm sorry, like if you're in this age of college football, you have to talk about players in a transactional way because that's how it is. You know, roster movement, players, their spots on roster, it's all transactional now. This isn't we're past the age where he's like we try to treat players with kids gloves, just students, they're just kids, they're just playing, they're making a bunch of money. Most of them, Brett Eskilson was probably making more money than most of us watching this stream are. Yeah, he was probably making more money than you, me, or anybody else. And he's gonna go make money someplace else too. If he makes it to the NFL, he's gonna make a bunch of money. They're functionally professional athletes at this point, and they treat their things as though it's transactional, which is fine because that's what it is. But if everybody else is going to be, if everybody's just treating everything as transactional, much the same way that the NFL is, then I don't really feel bad about saying Brett Eskilson was good, but he's not irreplaceably good. I think they can go get another guy in the portal that can absolutely replicate. I think if you develop Chase Soul, he can absolutely exceed anything that Eskilson did last year. So I'm not really worried about keeping Brett Eskilson. It's a bummer because he's an Iowa State legacy, but I'm not too worried about losing him necessarily. Especially when you're going to a pro style offense that's really going to probably only feature like a couple of receivers. You're going to be in 12-13 type personnel, and you're going to be you're not going to have a ton of receivers on the field, and it's not going to be like a super heavy passing game. Maybe Brett Eskilson just doesn't fit in the offense that well. So, it is what it is. They will find guys. So other than Orange, the D line was pretty ass. It actually absolutely was. Dom Orange is the only player on that entire defensive line that did what they needed to do. Like now, I do want to say the guy I am most looking forward to seeing if he stays and decides like this is my opportunity is Kenny Eziogu. If he can play on that play in that 4 down front. I mean, he's big enough. He could play potentially as that defensive tackle, not the nose tackle, but as a defensive tackle. But if you could put Zymier at the nose tackle, find another defensive tackle that fits there. Maybe it's Ajibula Efuye if he's good enough as a freshman. Whoever Elijah Carnell as the other defensive tackle, and then keep Kenny Eziogu as an edge rusher in that 4 down front. I think that is absolutely an awesome opportunity for him to blossom and to really develop as a pass rusher. To me, if I were a defensive lineman at Iowa State right now, I would be giving very heavy consideration to sticking around because this new scheme is going to be much friendlier to you. It's going to be much easier to play in. It's going to be much easier if you're a pass rusher to get to the quarterback in a 4 down front. You're going to have a much easier time doing your job in this new system than you were in the old one where the old one you're expected to just be the defensive version of the offensive line where it's just it's an unsung hero that's not going to put up any stats. You're just going to go out there and do your job. And hopefully that's good enough to let everybody else on the defense do their job. In a 4-2-5 system, the defensive ends absolutely have a chance to shine. And I hope Kenny Eziogu sticks around because I think this could be his opportunity to really blossom into a really high level pass rusher. Okay, I have there's a couple questions here I do want to talk about here, but I do want to, the last thing I do want to say, I wanted to just a couple of short words about Jon Heacock retiring. And so his announced day, he put it on his Twitter, I think, that Jon Heacock said he's retiring from football. And it's obviously not following Matt Campbell to Penn State, not sticking around, which I think a lot of people had suspected that Jon was just going to retire whenever Matt Campbell left. And that is exactly what happened. If Iowa State does not hire Eli Rashid, I would guess that that's potentially an outcome for him as well. But I do want to just say, obviously, congratulations to Jon. It's a well-deserved retirement. For the last 10 years, he has been one of the best defensive coordinators in college football. and it is not hyperbole to say that he literally shaped what modern defenses look like in college football and the NFL. His 3-3 stack that his version of the 3-3 stack that he pioneered at Iowa State has become a staple across the entire sport at virtually every level. You know, there are lots of programs that just run it as their base defense now, but at minimum, virtually every program now has a 3-3 stack package in their defensive scheme, and that is due to Jon Heacock and how good it was at stopping the Big 12 air raid offenses, which obviously the air raid offenses have populated all over the place, NFL, college, and everything like that, and you need defenses to stop those. Jon Heacock's defense does that. So, I mean, it is not hyperbolic whatsoever to say that Jon Heacock is maybe the single most influential figure as far as modern scheme, both offensively and defensively, because now offensive schemes have now adapted to trying to beat that 3-3 stack. So you can thank Jon Heacock a lot for just kind of how for the current cutting edge of football scheme. Jon Heacock had a major part to play in that. And that's about it. I mean, for a coordinator, that is just about the highest honor you can pay them, is that they fundamentally changed how we play the sport today, and had a major part in doing so. So congratulations to Jon Heacock, a much deserved retirement. I don't know if he's planning on sticking around Ames. It'd be cool as hell if he did. He's not from here. I think I want to say he's from Pennsylvania or he was at the coach at Youngstown State. He may choose to retire at home. He may choose to retire down in Florida. But either way, congratulations to Jon Heacock. Yeah. Oh yeah. Done. He did it at Iowa State. It's absolutely insane. Imagine being told the sport of football changed the defensive look nationwide in 2013 when our defenses are getting cooked left and right. Yeah. I do want to, one of the first videos of, like, I want to put together this off season, essentially is why Iowa State is the most important school, why Iowa State is the most influential school in college athletics over the last 15 years. Because you can trace the current transfer portal you can trace the lineage of the current transfer portal back to the Fred Hoiberg teams that used it to completely reshape the roster and build really competitive teams overnight, basically. You can trace the lineage back there. You can trace college football, which obviously that bleeds over college basketball, college football, and now all sports. And then now you can look at college football and NFL scheme, looking at Jon Heacock and how that's all that. You can argue that Iowa State was the single is maybe the largest single driving force of, just for better or worse, what college football looks like today, where basically Iowa State has done more than any other school as far as taking the weaknesses in the system, or taking things in the system that aren't quite right, and using those things as leverage to make their, to improve whatever they're doing, to improve the team, to improve the scheme, whatever it is, taking what it is and thinking about it differently, and using that different way of thinking to not exploit the system, but to take advantage of it. And then eventually they did it so well that everybody else started doing it. And then that just changed how things work now. So that is a fun research project / video essay thing I want to do some point during the off season, especially after basketball's over. But yeah, so we're about up on time here. Oh, so the one I wanted to go back to, I saw a good question here. After seeing the Notre Dame USC rivalry end, makes you think how long the Cyhawk game lasts in football. This is an interesting question. On the one hand, I think both parties, both Iowa State and Iowa, have a vested interest in keeping it going. I think they both want to keep it going. As much as as much as some fans would want to suggest to you that the rivalry needs to go away, all this, whatever. The rivalry is an objectively good thing for the state of Iowa, being that, Iowa State and Iowa football are essentially the two pro teams in the state. It's a massive driver of economic activity. I think if you can make it happen, you absolutely should keep that rivalry, the yearly rivalry, going. That said, how much longer will the college football landscape continue to facilitate that. We'll see. I think Notre Dame USC is a little bit different because with Notre Dame not being in conference, USC feeling pressure to um, not schedule many difficult out of conference games, um, and also I think USC just I just detect a hint of apathy from like the University of Southern California as far as the standing of their football program. I know that they're in the Big Ten now. I know they have Lincoln Riley as their coach. I get it. Like I get it. They have things in place that suggest that they are serious about wanting to compete for national titles and all that. Just seeing how USC operates in modern and just in the current landscape of college football, I do not get the I do not get the vibes of a university that is dedicated to making sure that their football program is at the very tippy top of the sport like it used to be. So I I could be it could be a bad read on my part. I don't know, but I get the feeling that USC is expressing a little bit of apathy here in like they're not prioritizing maintaining that rivalry because they want to get I think they're more interested in just expanding the role within the Big Ten and then worrying about just finding whatever is best for USC in the moment versus trying to maintain some level of tradition and pageantry within the sport. Cyclones longevity depends on how serious the Big 12 and Big 10 and SEC get about this breaking from the NCAA thing. Yeah. If the Big 10 and the SEC are really serious about breaking away from the NCAA and they are considering leaving behind any portion of the rest of the Power Four. So if those two conferences break away and are considering leaving behind any portion of the Big 12 or the ACC, then I could see Cyhawk dying immediately. Like if they do break away, Cyhawk goes away just like that. Because they'll have a scheduling agreement where like they'll play X amount of conference games, the non-conference game go against the other conference type of thing. That's how they'll do it. It'll be lame. It'll be stupid. It'll die eventually because it's an objectively stupid thing to do to college football. But you're gonna bifurcate the sport in an irreparable way. But if that doesn't happen, or if everybody leaves the NCAA and college football, just the whole thing comes with, then, or at least the top, 80 or something like that, like where you bring in at least all of the power conference teams and then, a handful of G5 teams, the competitive G5 schools, Tulane, Boise State, those, USFs, those types of schools. If you take all those, bring them with, and you can largely preserve a lot of these historical rivalries, then yeah, I think Cyhawk can stay. But we'll see. If Cyhawk ever doesn't continue to happen, which like I said, right now I think it will because I think both schools are interested and committed to keeping the rivalry going and to keeping that yearly scheduling thing going. But if that goes away, then it does open up a slot in Iowa State's schedule to go find another Power 5 game. Maybe you can finally get a home and home with Wisconsin or Nebraska or whatever. And it is what it is. I think the Cyhawk series is currently contracted through 2032, I want to say. So beyond that, it kind of is what it is. In 2032 is 6 seasons from now. My guess is the sport will look completely different it'll look completely different at that point than what it does right now. So we'll just have to kind of play it by ear and see what it is. It would be a shame to lose that, but there's not a lot to be done necessarily. So, all right, I think I'm going to wrap her up for this week. I appreciate everybody. Appreciate all the conversation, appreciate all the interaction and the discussion in the comments. I really appreciate that every week. I know, I really, really do, because it makes this a lot easier to keep doing it by myself. At some point, I'm going to find a co-host. And I have a couple ideas in mind because the one I had in mind last year just didn't work out. But I'm going to get a co-host at some point. But I appreciate everybody. Appreciate everybody in the Discord. I do want to, so quick thing for my other stuff that I do for Iowa State. Obviously, last week we announced that I and myself, we are all leaving Wide Right Natty Light. We were trying to take. We would like to. We are leaving SB Nation, I should say. We tried to take the Wide Right Natty Light branding with us, and SB Nation would not budge. They wouldn't. They wouldn't even. They would. They. I mean, we offered them. We sent an offer to them. They really. I mean, they entertained it, but they really didn't. And at some point after the move is completely done, I'll probably put out a video elaborating on that. But just kind of how everything happened. But we will not be with Wide Right Natty Light anymore. They will have a completely new staff, top to bottom, and we have a new thing. I'm not going to tell you right now because we're going to reveal it later. But this weekend, you can expect some news on that front as far as kind of what that's all going to look like. We're really excited for it. I think this is it's an awesome move for us. It's an awesome move for everybody involved. I think, and it's going to really step up what we can do as far as covering the Cyclones, providing really fun content for everybody. And one thing I can elaborate is that a lot of the stuff that you guys like over the years have become loyal followers of Down the Pipe and Natty Light, offensively offensive recently with Sean and Tom, the nightcap, the light cast, all of that will remain. All of that will stay. So if you guys like the light cast is staying. We will have all of that available, but I'll be able to elaborate more this weekend once we kind of can officially roll out the full deal. So keep an eye out for that. Maybe Saturday, Sunday, something, in that range we'll do. It's really just, we want to get past the holiday. So that way people can focus on their Christmas and all that. And our news isn't getting buried by the holiday stuff. So everybody, thank you. Really appreciate it. Hope to see you guys back again. Probably do something. I'll have to decide if I'm doing a show next week. I'm not 100% sure yet. We'll see what kind of news comes out. I might choose to just take a week off and focus on this new thing. But either way, next time we'll come back. Hopefully we'll have more updates on the transfer portal, maybe some more incoming players, more official announcements as far as the coaching staff. But everybody have a great holiday weekend. Stay safe. Enjoy it. Be thankful for whatever you got going on in your life. And we'll see you guys again next week. Thanks.